Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Audio Cycling YouTube channel, where today we're going to be taking a look at Omloop Het Nieuwsblad, the first round of the Super Classico. Usually it starts with Strade Bianche, but George has done an absolute belter here and got it ready for the opening weekend, which is great to see. There will be, Kuurne-Brussel-Kuurne as well on Sundays, which is really exciting to see. And yeah, it's like 45 races to Super Classico. I managed to finish 9th in the world in this competition last year, so I'm hoping that I can have a really good start, similar to like I did last year at Strade, and really try and defend that top 10 and go for something maybe even better this year. And it's all about consistency. But let's take a look at what Omloop Het Nieuwsblad sort of looks like. Obviously, is 197 kilometers, really identified by the Keppelmer-Bosberg duo within the last 20 kilometers of the race. But usually the attacking really starts in this section between 140 kilometers to 168 kilometers. That's really where you're seeing a lot of the frequency of the hills, and that's where a lot of the moves are made, maybe even a little bit earlier, like say around here, like the Valkenburg possibly. You might even see some moves being formed. Last year, and actually for a few years now, the trend has been that we've seen solo riders go to the line. Obviously, Tratnik attacked with Pollitt, so maybe that's not a solo, but you get what I mean. We've had Tratnik, then Dylan van Baarle, Wout van Aert. Then in 2021 was the last time we saw sort of a bunch sprint with Ballerini. The year before that was Stuyven. The year before that was Stibar. So that's kind of a trend that we're seeing here. It generally seems to go that we've had solo riders and then a bit of a sprint amongst, say, anywhere between 20 to 30 riders in a group behind. The weather's looking good, how that influences your opinion of how the race is going to go. The wind isn't too strong either, so I'm not sure whether that favours more attacking style racing or perhaps favours the sprinters. It's definitely worth noting that of all the teams here, I mean, obviously, I will get into the VELOGAMES, don't worry, but a lot of the teams here aren't sprinter orientated, let's say. There's possibly only really two teams in Alpecin-Deceuninck and Soudal Quickstep, so perhaps that does indicate towards a more attacking style of race. And I'm telling you this just so that it justifies some of the reasoning that I'm going to be giving. But Wout van Aert is the most expensive rider. I think he was 32 credits last year, so he's taken a price decrease. Obviously, these prices remain fixed for the whole year. So Wout, he's the sensible choice. You know, he's won this race before. He's got the option of going solo. He can win from a sprint, or at least finish second place. That's where he tends to usually finish. But he can really kind of do it all, and I think that he is, in all reality, on paper, the best rider on this start list. So Wout is the sensible option to be going with. I don't think there's, maybe he hasn't looked the best, Wout van Aert, so far this year, but I don't think that really puts me off too much. Wout really has the ability just to kind of turn it on and really kind of hammer races. And especially in a field like this, I think that he is the favourite. So, makes sense. Philipsen at 28 credits. It's quite a lot. I will probably be putting him on for Kuurne-Brussel-Kuurne. But 28 credits for a rider who doesn't have the best history in this race isn't one I'm particularly enticed by. De Lee, perhaps a little bit better than Philipsen. He's definitely had better results than Philipsen this year. He's done pretty good in this race in the past. I think he was inside the top 10 last year. And he also gets into those attacking moves, which is important because obviously the scoring system gives you points based upon like if you're in a winning kind of leading group at 50 kilometers to go, 20 kilometers to go, and 10 kilometers to go. So therefore, De Lee has a better chance of doing that than I'd say Philipsen does. Jorgensen is a very odd one because we haven't seen any racing from him so far this year, but that shouldn't put you off because Dylan van Baarle won this race in 2023 in exactly the same scenario. He just won straight out of the gates. So Jorgensen, I think, is a risky one just because we don't have that historical data from him this year. But at the same time, I wouldn't completely write him out, especially if he's in a group with Wout van Aert and he attacks solo. Nobody's really going to want to tow Wout van Aert to the line, are they? So that's certainly a scenario which favours Jorgensen. Pidcock, he's been in great form. And generally, you do see that the riders who do well in this race are ones who have done well in like the races beforehand. Tratnik is a great example from last year. And Pidcock's looks so good this year. Does this race suit him? He's even admitted that it doesn't. But if it comes down to some sort of sprint amongst 20 riders for some minor placings, Pidcock will probably finish inside the top 10. Benoit, I think, will just be a domestique, although he is usually ridiculously consistent at picking up points in the Super Classico. If you go back to previous years, he's usually always inside the top 10, so Benoit is consistent, but perhaps not the highest scoring, really, in any particular scenario. Kung, I don't think has looked that great this year. I would probably wait until we see some races from him to gauge where he's at. Mayus, again, another one I'll put on for Kerner, but probably not for this one. Could he survive into that Group 2? He could do, but I think he would need to have pretty extraordinary legs to be able to do that. And I think that Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe is generally a team for this race more tailored towards an attacking style of race. And I'm not sure if Mayus is really going to be the guy who they're riding for. Mohoric has looked okay this season. I mean, he did get smoked pretty bad by Pedersen in the Tour de la Provence, but he and Fred Wright are leading this team according to Bahrain Victorious' press release, so therefore he's certainly worthwhile thinking about. Tim Bellens, another man in form. He's been looking here. I don't think he's won this year, but he has been incredibly consistent. And I think that he's one of these riders who could solo to victory, for sure. He's got that ability, and especially with such a strong UAE Team Emirates team going into this race, who could mark moves behind. Vellens, I think, has got a good shot of going for a solo kind of move in this race. His downside is that he doesn't have much of a sprint, so if he does get kind of reabsorbed into a group behind, he will not be sprinting to very good positions. So he's a bit of a do or die pick, is how I'd put it. But 20 credit riders, I like Stuyven. I think he's got a good track record in this race. He's obviously won it. And I'd say that honestly the 20s aren't that great. Turns has looked good this year, but I just don't think it's a race that suits him too much, to be honest. Maybe he finishes inside the top 10 if a attritional move gets off the front, but he can't sprint for those minor positions, which is quite important. Bettiol Groves, I'm not really too keen on. Pollitt, yes, he finished second last year, a bit out of nowhere. Could he do the same? Yes, but that could be the same for any one of these riders who hasn't shown good form so far this year. So with Pollitt, I would say there are better choices from the UAE camp. And Schoins wasn't blowing my socks off in the Tour de la Provence. And I think after how good he was last year, he should realistically be looking towards peaking for the bigger races like the Tour of Flanders rather than Omloop Het Nieuwsblad. But I'd be more than willing to be proved wrong because I like Schoins. And he was in the winning move last year, but then it got absorbed into the group behind. But so I would say Stuyven is the best one of these. The 18 credit riders, again, there are some which I really like, especially Magnier. I mean, speaking of guys in form, Magnier is that guy. Figueroa Champions Classic, he was second place, did really well to make it over those climbs. He's climbing so well. He's such a fast sprinter as well. And he won a stage in Vietois de Bessèges, that first uphill kick, so he's clearly a man in form. So I think that Magnier is a good pick. It's just that a guy so young who hasn't done Omloop before, how is he going to fare? He is in a team which has got such pedigree in the Cobble Classics, so they'll know how to ride these races. So Magnier's got a good shot, I think, of being in that group behind and sprinting to some good minor placings. Narvaez, another man who's been in fantastic form this year, Ecuadorian champion, won the Tour Down Under, and I think the Narvaez for 18 credits is a really good option for all teams. He can do it all. He can basically do what Wout van Aert can do in this race. I think he could go solo. He could sprint to some minor placings. He's actually quite good in a bit of a bunch sprint as well. So I think Narvaez has got it all. Tratnik, last year's winner, in my opinion, hasn't looked as good this year. So I'm not too sure about him, but Red Bull have got so many options in this race that it's certainly possible that Tratnik could do something. And he has said in an article recently that his legs are as good as last year. It's just that the results haven't shown it. So whether you want to believe that or not, I'm not too sure. Not for now. I won't go with the Mish. 16 credit riders. Adlia, obviously he's seen a big price increase from 8 credits last year to 16 credits. Again, he's one of these Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe options. He hasn't looked great this year, but he's certainly worthwhile mentioning. Lascano, very similarly, hasn't looked great this year, but he's got big aspirations for the Tour of Flanders, so I expect that he'll be coming into some good form fairly soon, whether that'll be just now or perhaps a bit later on. I mean, obviously last year in Kerner he did finish in 3rd place, so he's not unknown to sort of pulling a mad performance out of the bag. Morgado and Antonio Morgado, another fantastic option. He's been in great form this year, and I think that again he's a very good option for a lot of teams. UE Team Emirates have got so many options. I think they'll be doing a bit of a quick step from the kind of 2010s and getting multiple riders into the moves. So I think that Morgado's good. No reason to not go with him. Narsen was 4th in this race last year, a bit out of nowhere, under the radar. And he's been sprinting okay this year in the Ruta del Sol. So I think that he'll be leading the team, and I think that he's a good candidate for a top 10. He can kind of, again, do it all. Vacek's been in great form this year. Yeah, he was sprinted to 3rd in the Figueroa Champions Classic. He's climbing well. He's sprinting pretty good too. Him and Stuyven Schoens will be a good trio. So I think Vacek is certainly another one to consider. Lawrence Rex was something like 6th or 7th in this race last year. Very underrated as well. One that not a lot of people will pick, I expect. The 14 credit riders, Blackmore has been in decent form. You know, Tour de Alpes Maritime, he was strong. And I think that he's a great one-day racer. And I think that, again, I'm not sure. Yeah, he should be getting into the moves. He's not that much of a sprinter. And again, not one that a lot of people will pick. So a good differential. Sheehan has looked pretty decent too this year. Yeah, he's been sprinting some okay positions. But I don't know who Israel Premier Tech you have as their leader. So it's hard to categorically say which one is better. Ben Turner, I think, honestly has looked I think he's looked really good. He was sprinting against Christophe in Ruta del Sol. He was like just outside the top 10 in Classica Jaén. He's climbing pretty well. I think that Ben Turner is, Big Ben is looking strong right now, and I'm feeling quite bullish about his chances for the weekend, actually. Very similarly for Fred Wright. I thought he looked good in Tour de la Provence. He's sprinting pretty well, and he's, just looked like the Fred Wright of old, of like a couple of years ago, and he usually does he's very consistent over these cobbled races. I think that he's a candidate for the top 10 or top 15. He could get into the moves. He can sprint pretty well as well. So with him being a leader for this race for Bahrain Victorious, he should be another good pick that perhaps you might consider in this 14 credit bracket. I'd say Turner and Fred Wright and one of the Israel Premier Tech riders are my favourites. The 12 credit riders, Jenfe Beermans, I think he was 16th in this race last year. He sprints pretty well, so from a group behind, he's certainly a decent choice. Coquard, he again has won. He won in the Tour Down Under this year. He sprints well, but generally doesn't go that well over the Cobble Classics. Rather peculiarly. I don't know why. So from that perspective, he's not a good pick, but from a form and being able to sprint perspective, he is a good choice. But the fact that he doesn't usually do well in cobbled races kind of makes me a little bit nervous. Ivan Garcia Cortina usually does pretty well in these sorts of races. Kind of like Fred Wright. I think that he could sprint to a top 10 or 15. And Jake Stewart, again, Israel Premier Tech, he should be their sort of sprinter reserve rider. Whilst you've got Blackmore attacking, Stewart should be able to sit behind. And again, he's been sprinting well. He was second to Milan on that final day sprint in the Volta Comunitat Valenciana, that was it. So yeah, Jake Stewart is again a good choice. You got Tim van Dijk, I think Mick van Dijk's down here as well. You could go for either of those as well, but I think realistically they'll be domestiques. However, Red Bull have got lots of options, so I may as well cover them all. The 10s, Fabio Kristen I would recommend, but he did take a bit of a hard hit in Classica Jaén. He went down, he DNF'd that race. If he's looking fine from that, I think that he's a good choice, but I haven't seen any information, so I'm unwilling to absolutely give judgment on that. Persson Hageners, I think he'll just be a domestique, but he's a cobbled star of the future, so still worthwhile mentioning. Houligaard was strong of a Ruta del Sol, so certainly one to think about. This is a guy who, do you remember back in the 2021 World Championships around Leuven, all those cobble climbs, wasn't he like top 10 in that race? So Houligaard's certainly one to think about. Ploymers is a fast sprinter for Tudor. I don't know how he'd go over this style of race. He's quite a good one-day racer, but he's still a little bit of an unknown over the really nasty cobbles that we got here. So Ploymers could certainly be okay. Teutenberg, I don't expect to make it, but if he does, he should be the fastest sprinter that Lidl Trek have. Tarling could go for a sort of a long solo move, I expect. But he has to sort of get there. And yeah, he looked good in the UE Tour. He put in a fantastic time trial. But he kind of got dropped on the Jabal Jais perhaps a little bit faster than I would have thought or hoped for to make him a solid pick. But still, Tarling is worthwhile mentioning. The 8 credit riders, honestly, there aren't that many which I like the look of. Alligart, maybe, could sprint for Cofidis if Coquard gets dropped. De Pestel was strong in the Tour de la Provence. He was in that move with Pedersen. And Decathlon, with only really Oliver Naesen as their main leader, perhaps he could get some freedom. The same goes for Stan de Wolf, although I haven't seen as much of Stan de Wolf this year as I have of Sander de Pestel. And the other 8 credit riders, Jelte Kleinsen, Jake Walula don't generally have a leader in this race, so I think they'll play a pretty open race. Mikkels is a good sprinter, generally pretty hardy as well, so maybe he could make that group behind, which I'm imagining, and sprint for a decent position. And other than that, I'd say Sam Watson is my favourite 8 credit rider because he's been looking super good this year, sprints fast. For Guerla Championship Classic, he was 4th. He climbs really well at the moment. I think that's a really good sign that he's in good form. The 6s, you got Baranexia, who won the last stage for Ruta del Sol. Brennan is a late addition from Visma Lease Bike because they've had injuries to Van Baarle and Laporte and Behrens and lots of other people. So at 6 credits, Brennan is a fast sprinter. I don't know whether he'll survive to the finish, but worst case scenario, you're banking on some assist points. So that's perhaps a worthwhile risk that you might be willing to take. Donaldson is a good sprinter for Jake Walula. Again, I'm not sure whether he'd make it to the finish, but he's worthwhile mentioning nonetheless. Sean Flynn sprinted very well in, the Muscat Classic and maybe 1 or 2 stages of Vittorio Man. Picnic Postonel, again, don't really have that much of a leader, so I'd say Sean Flynn could get a pretty free card here. Govakar is just a domestique, perhaps a little bit of a better choice for Kerner. Header Hots for the assist points on any of the UE Team Emirates riders. Hola might survive for a top 30. Kubish, very good choice actually, because he's been sprinting fantastically. Tour de la Provence, he was super strong. And if he can make that second group or third group or whatever, he could get a top 30. But this is a race which is probably a step up to what he usually does. So perhaps err on the side of caution, but at 6 credits, you kind of... We're talking about the lower down prices here. You might be willing to take a risk on Lukasz Kubish. And other than them, Kelland O'Brien, do you remember a couple of years ago when he kept on getting in the break in like Dwarsdorf-Landeren, he got in the break and got a top 10 there. Movistar usually throws some riders in the break. Maybe Malaysia or Moro could be that guy. Sorgsborg Pedersen, the Danish champion, might sprint for Decathlon if he can make the finish. Again, worthwhile mentioning. Rob Stannard. Byron Victorious do say that if it comes down to a bit of a sprint, it'll be either Mohoric, Fred Wright or Stannard. So you could put him on in a vague hope that he might still survive. And then the 4 credit riders... Again, not that much to go at. You're mainly looking at riders who might go in the breakaway, pretty much. You know, the only person you could go for some assist points on, if you think somebody from Bahrain's going to do particularly well, you could go with Ermanov. But I think realistically, you're looking at guys to get in the breakaway. For me, that would be one of the Jayco riders. They don't have a big leader in this race, and as a World Tour team, they'll want to get their nice, cool jersey into the breakaway in front of the eyeballs. So I think either Campbell Stewart or Sutherland. So perhaps he could be a better one than the other ones. Kellerman was in the breakaway in the 2023 Glasgow World Championships. So he's clearly pretty adept at being in breakaways. One of the Uno X guys, again, they don't have a big favourite, so they might put somebody in the breakaway as well. Edmondson without a big leader again. As a World Tour team, they might put somebody in the break. So generally the World Tour teams which don't have a big leader might well put somebody in the breakaway. This is my team at the moment. I'm kind of between two teams. I'll show you the other one. Wellens, Narvaez, Magnier, Stuyven, Ben Turner and Watson. More of like a strength and depth, trying to get multiple riders into a winning move sort of team. My other alternative would be to go with Wout van Aert and then take off Magnier and go with Morgado, and then take Stuyven off and go with a 14 credit rider like Fred Wright. Alternatively, instead of doing that, I could go with Magnier and then take Turner off and put him down to a 10 credit rider, which would either be like Houlegaard or Ploymers. Realistically, I'll go with Houlegaard because I think he's got a better shot. So those are the sort of three teams that I'm between. It's quite a split team of, you know, Watson and Magnier as the sprint reserves and then more of attacking style team. So the teams vary in their sprint versus attacking sort of ratios, I suppose. But let me know what you're thinking in the comment sections down below. Are you excited that the Super Classico is starting with Omloop Het Nieuwsblad? Because I sure am, and I can't wait for the cobbles now. It's almost March, and that means that it's almost time for the Stage Race Championship. The warm-up championship is finished. If you want to get your wall charts still for those, they are still available. I'll have that in the link in the description. Put your teams in the comment sections down below, and all that is left to say is to stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next video. Salut!